Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Cigna Healthcare, a health benefits provider that advocates for better health through every stage of life. Learn more at Cigna.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
This is the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for being with us, and happy Election Day. Local issues and races are the stars of the show today, from high-profile mayoral elections to selection of the entire Cleveland City Council, to school and environmental levies, school board races, and more. But since it's an off-year election with no statewide contests and measures on the ballot, it's also expected to be a low-turnout election. Here to tell us more about IdeaStream Public Media's news coverage today, we have Deputy Editor Andrew Meyer. Andrew, thanks for being with us in studio.
My pleasure, Stephanie. Good to be with you.
And we have Supervising Producer of Newscasts, Glenn Forbes, joining us on the phone. Good morning, Glenn. Happy to have you with us.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, if you have questions about what's on the ballot today or want to share what's happening at your polling location, you can give us a call. That's 866-578-0903 to call in. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Glenn, we'll start with you, and we'll talk about some of the big mayoral races we've been following. Who's going to be covering those outcomes, especially with all of the activities surrounding the mayors in East Cleveland and Cleveland Heights? So what do we need to know, and who's on those beats today?
Yeah, so in Cleveland Heights, IdeaStream Public Media, very few that area. He covered the controversy and then the former mayor, or rather Khalil Sarin, and the transition to current mayor and former council president Tony Kuda. But Kuda, he's not running for mayor. He's not on the ballot. Even about 4 months. Both candidates, and Davita Russell, she's the vice president of council. His firm. The primary between those two was extremely close. Both received about 41 more votes than Russell out of about 8,400 cast. So if you're projecting forward to tonight, could be very close.
And who
in East Cleveland,
Go ahead, Glenn. Thanks.
I was going to say, sorry, IdeaStream's Matt Richmond. He's covering East Cleveland and the Republican office.
Glenn, we're going to check some of the connectivity that's happening. It's a little difficult to hear you here in the studio, so we're going to be back with you in just a minute. Andrew, I'm going to move to you, and we want to move out of Cuyahoga County for just a minute. There's a major charter amendment on the ballot in Summit County that has to do with property taxes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's actually one of two county-wide issues that are on the ballot for all voters in Summit County, and it's meant to address the huge jump in property taxes that resulted from the big jump in property valuations as a result of the latest round of assessments. Now, this is a little bit of a paradox that's going on here. It actually started in response to a proposed state bill that was going to remove inside millage, and that's the first few mills of property taxes that you pay that you don't get to vote on. Well, Summit County's counter was, hey, let's be realistic about what we're asking, because when your property valuations go up, if it's pegged to the levy, well, then it's going to jump up as well. But what Summit County did with its charter amendment is said, we're going to cap any increase in property taxes at 3%, which is separate from what it would be if it was simply tied to the levy. It's significantly less, potentially. So what's really interesting about this, the chicken and egg part of this, is that the sponsors of one of the state bills, I believe it's HB 355, but the numbers are all, they're numbers are numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It would put the kibosh on inside millage, but, those sponsors thought that was such a good idea what Summit County proposed that they said, hey, why don't we co-opt that language and make that part of what we're proposing statewide? Now, that's what issue 2 is about in Summit County. That's what voters are ultimately weighing in on today. I did mention there are two countywide issues. Issue 1 is actually a renewal and a slight increase for the county's ADM board, which supports drug addiction, alcohol services, mental health services for the county. And Summit is one of about a half dozen counties in Northeast Ohio that have an ADM levy on their ballots today.
Okay. Well, there are several levies on ballots across Northeast Ohio asking voters to support parks, Andrew. So what are some of those major ones?
Well, what's interesting about this, sometimes you're looking at these countywide issues, they're a little below the radar, under the radar. I was actually driving over to Fowler's Mill to play golf about a month or so ago, and I noticed a sign for Geauga Parks having a levy. So we did a little digging. We discovered there are 4 counties in Northeast Ohio that have levies on their ballots. Ashland, Geauga, Medina are looking for a slight increase. Lake County is looking for a renewal. So it supports, what you find in your county park systems in those parts.
All right. I think we have Glenn back, and I'm hoping our connection has improved. I'm told it has. Hi, Glenn.
Hey, how much did you get from that Cleveland Heights the explanation, Stephanie?
Just the words Cleveland Heights, so I'm going to ask you to start there.
So Idea Stream Public Media's Gabriel Kramer will be there. He's been covering Cleveland Heights quite a bit. The controversy and the eventual recall of former Mayor Khalil Sarin and the transition to current mayor and former council president Tony Kuda. Kuda is not running for mayor, though, so that means Cleveland Heights will have 3 mayors in about 4 months. Both candidates are council members, Jim Petrus and Davita Russell. She is the vice president of council. Petrus is serving his first term there. The primary between those two was extremely close. They're the top 2 vote getters, so they move on to today, obviously. But Petrus received about 41 more votes than Russell out of about 8,400 cast. So if you're projecting out to tonight, could be very close again.
All right, we want to talk about the city of Cleveland now, Glenn. Incumbent Mayor Justin Bibb is facing challenger community activist Laverne Gore, and there are also races for every single city council seat, which makes this an important time because the council is shrinking with newly drawn wards. So what are the highlights to know there, and who are we looking at for that coverage?
Right. So council, as you mentioned, shrinking from 17 seats down to 15 due to population loss. That means 2 races have incumbents squaring off. Idea Stream's Abby Marshall, she's been all over this. Plenty of coverage already on ideastream.org. We're particularly watching Mike Polensek, the dean of council, as they call him. He's been serving since 1977. He's looking for his 12th term. It's possible this might be his toughest test. He's in the newly drawn Ward 10 on Cleveland's east side. His opponent is Anthony Hairston, and he has the backing of Council President Blaine Griffin and the campaign funding controlled by Griffin. Polensek decided somewhat late that he would run for another term. Polensek told us he was basically told to throw the fight, if you will, and kind of walk away from the election. But Polensek, he chairs the safety committee. He said after talking to residents, he wanted to run again. He feels there's a lot more to do. So that's one race between incumbents. The other one is a bit contentious in Ward 5 between incumbents Rebecca Moore and Richard Starr. Again, going by primary numbers, Starr was a big winner in September. Moore has publicly clashed with Blaine Griffin throughout her term on council. She accused him of basically splitting up her ward and pitting her against Starr due to political reasons. Griffin denies that claim. There is another race to note. Downtown in Ohio City will have a new representative. Terry McCormack resigned a few months ago. Attorneys Mohammed Faraj and Austin Davis were the winners of the primary. That's the most expensive race in the city. Davis did have the upper hand over Faraj in the primary, 56-33. So we shall see if that holds tonight.
And Andrew, Anna Huntsman is covering potential newcomers to Akron City Council. Anything of note to watch out there?
Well, this is atypical because this is off cycle, and there are 2 ward seats that are up this time around. Basically, a special election. There were vacancies during this current council session. One of them is uncontested. That's Bruce Bolden in Ward 8. He did face a primary challenge, but the one that we're watching tonight is going to be Ward 1, where you have Fran Wilson and Acacia Reynolds running against each other. They're both longtime community presences. They show up very regularly at City Council. Fran Wilson has been says that they've been in the city for generations. Acacia Reynolds is a relative newcomer, having moved to Akron in 2018. So that's what's at stake for Ward 1 there.
All right, staying in Akron, Andrew, earlier this month, IdeaStream partnered with other newsrooms and had a debate between 8 Akron school board candidates vying for 4 spots. So tell us more about those candidates and who's on those results.
Well, it's really interesting. You hear school board race, and you're like, really? Can I watch the paint dry instead? But this really is one of the most captivating races of all local races in Northeast Ohio this go around. And it's because you basically have 2 opposing forces. You have 3 current board members who represent, according to the opposition, the status quo and what's not working with the Akron Public Schools and the Board of Ed. There's been contentiousness over having several superintendents in the last several years, one that the board butted heads with, another one, the most recent one, previous one, who the board had to commission a report that ultimately found that he created a hostile work environment, and he was there was evidence of bullying by him. Now, where it all culminated is they separated his employment. That's legalese, as you're familiar with, without saying what really happened. But ultimately, the same night that they chose to part ways and sign the agreement to offer an agreement, they immediately said, hey, let's make the acting interim superintendent our new superintendent. Well, that raised some real howls about transparency, about public input, and there's a real question between the existing board members who are running for re-election and those who are challenging them about whether or not the board is really serving the best interest of all the people of Akron. So that's what's at stake here for this race. There are 4 open seats on the election, 3 incumbents, 5 other challengers, and I think I could give all the names. But then we'd be at 10 o'clock, so I'll forego that for now.
Sure. Well, I do want to ask you about school districts seeking levy support very quickly, Andrew. What are some of the major districts that education reporter Connor Morris is covering?
A couple of dozen districts with levies on the ballot today. 3 that we're watching in particular is Parma, which is asking for new money yet again. They have not gotten a new money request approved in 15 years, and they have been trying hard. Also, Streetsboro and Elyria both have new money requests, and they have had previous failed attempts. So some of the challenges overall, Connor's been doing a great job of tracking levies over the last several years. We did see in some increasing difficulty with levies, districts getting their levies approved. That seems to have plateaued or evened out with the last election. But one thing that's interesting, when we do our analysis post after the fact of our coverage, we find that people are very much interested in the levies and in the results. So you can find a full accounting of what's on the ballot today at ideastream.org/election 2025, including all of our great coverage so far.
And Glenn, we have a question for you from our audience member, Stephen. Stephen says that from his recollection that the last time that voting was talked about at length on this show, on The Sound of Ideas, turnout numbers seemed low, but were actually talked about as high. So can you give us any kind of a context there? What's normal for this region, and how does it compare to the rest of the country, if you're able?
Yeah, a couple things to remember. I mean, it is an off-year election. 2023 was very different because there were 2 big statewide issues on the ballot. So that pushed turnout up to about 45%. A couple things to look at here. I mean, first of all, no one is really expecting high turnout today. If you think about the city of Cleveland, the wards with competitive races you would think would have some higher turnout. The September primary, though, fewer than 9,000 people, that's about 7% of registered voters cast ballots. So it is expected to be somewhat low. The last mayoral election in Cleveland was 2021. That was about 26% turnout, but that was a more, contested mayoral election. And it was the first election without Frank Jackson. So there were, Justin Bibb and former Council President Kevin Kelly. Dennis Kucinich was involved in that race. So that, I think, pushed turnout closer to 26%. It's probably going to be a bit lower than that. Abby Marshall, as I mentioned, she did do a story about the council candidates in uncontested elections actually going out and kind of campaigning for people to just go out and vote. Kevin Bishop, he's running unopposed, but he told Abby they don't want anybody to get disillusioned even more with the election process. He says the more engagement, the better. West Side Rep Jasmine Santana was doing the same thing. She's running unopposed, but she's out there trying to get out the vote and explain to people how important it is. So it'll be interesting to see, but probably expecting numbers around 20% for Cuyahoga County.
All right, Glenn Forbes, thank you very much for being with us here on The Sound of Ideas. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Andrew, one more time, remind us where people can get the election results as they come in today.
Sure. If you go to ideastream.org/election2025, you can find what our team is going to be covering this evening as the results come in. And you can also find links to all of the results from your Northeast Ohio County Board of Elections there. And then we will also be passing along our results on social. We're on Facebook at IdeaStream News and on Instagram at IdeaStreamNEO.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for being with us in studio today, Andrew.
You're welcome.
All right, our IdeaStream News team's coverage plan, you just heard the layout there. For our show tomorrow, we'll hear from some of the winning candidates, so join us for that, and we'll also look ahead to 2026 major races. We're going to take a quick break now, and on the other side, we'll learn about how Head Start programs in Ohio are faring as some run out of federal funding. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. You're with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. The federal government shutdown has now stretched into its 34th day. That's tying the record for the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, which ran from late 2018 into early 2019. Now, over the past few weeks, we've talked about how the shutdown is affecting everything from furloughed federal employees to families seeing their SNAP benefits run out. Now, another program is feeling the impact. That program is Head Start. 7 Head Start providers here in Ohio have already run out of federal funding. Some have had to close their doors, while others are scrambling to stay open. If Congress doesn't pass a budget for fiscal year 2026, or at least a short-term spending measure, these closures could extend even further, affecting more than 3,700 children, 940 staff members, and countless working parents who rely on the program for childcare. So with me now to talk about what this funding loss could mean for families and providers, we have several guests with us on the phone. Julie Stone is the Executive Director of the Ohio Head Start Association. Julie, thanks for calling in today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good morning.
We're also joined by Susan Craddock, the Executive Director of the Coshocton County Head Start Program. Susan, thanks for calling in.
Good morning.
And we have Amber Manbeck, the Family Community Engagement Manager of the Coshocton County Head Start Program. Amber, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you in our audience would like to join the conversation, you can do that by calling us at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, and you can always send us a message on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Julie, I'll address the first question to you. Can you give us a broad picture here? How many Head Start programs does Ohio have, and who has not received funding as of November 1st?
So the Head Start programs in Ohio receive their funding directly from the federal government, and we have 59 providers in Ohio. We operate in all 88 counties and serve the neediest families. So we are truly foundational to Ohio's early care and education ecosystem. 7 of the providers were expecting their annual funding November 1st and did not receive that.
Okay, and how many children then are currently without access to Head Start programs in the affected counties?
So 5 of the programs have figured out a way to stay open temporarily for varying amounts of time. 2 programs were forced to close in Highland County and Scioto County, and collectively they serve about 600 children and employ 150 people. And yesterday was the first day of their closure.
Okay. Susan, now of the 2 Head Start programs that are continuing with limited funding, Allen and Coshocton, where did that funding come from? And are workers there still being paid?
Yes, we was planning on closing on the 31st, but we reached out into the community and we had a donation and then also some matching funds, and we were able to stay open for 2 more weeks. The teachers all staff are still working. The teachers are in the classrooms with the children. But it's devastating that I might have to close. I probably will have to close on November 14th.
Of the money that you have that you've been able to get from donors, and from what I understand, those donations have come from community members, churches, and food suppliers, what is that money being used for while you're able to stay open?
We've had a lot of donations of food is mostly what we've gotten for donations. And then we did receive one check today from our Kiwanis Club, and it was specified for food. So the community is rallying around these children not having food or SNAP to keep them fed while we might be off. So we are still reaching out, trying to get donations to keep open and keep our staff here.
And Susan, at the Coshocton County Head Start, how many children will be impacted if you do have to close on the 14th?
Yes, we have 140 children. 44 of those are infant and toddlers, and 96 are preschoolers.
140 children, the infants and toddlers, and up to preschool. Thank you for making that clear for us, Susan. Now, Amber, let's bring you into the conversation. You have a long history with Ohio Head Start program, so tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so my story actually starts clear back in 2013 when I first signed up my oldest daughter for Head Start. After I signed her up, I got involved in the parent committee and policy council. I ended up going with them to Washington, D.C. and representing our first parent ambassador program. So I was in the first cohort of that. After being a parent volunteer for 3 years, I ended up being employed by Head Start in 2016. I became a family advocate. From there, I also became assistant administrator, and I worked there for over 8 years. I am currently now in a management position as enrollment and family and community partnership. So it's been a full cycle from where I started. Now I get to help families.
Amber, thank you for sharing that story with us. I want to remind our audience that we're talking about Head Start programs here in Northeast Ohio and the impact that those programs are seeing because of the government shutdown now in its 34th day. If you'd like to call in with a question or a comment, that number is 866-578-0903. You can also reach us by email at soi@ideastream.org. And Amber, I'll stay with you now. There's a misconception that Head Start is basically the equivalent of traditional daycare. So can you tell us what services are provided at Head Start beyond childcare that people might not know about?
Yeah, so Head Start is comprehensive. We have various services that we give, not just education, but health services, mental health, family services. So we do focus on a lot of different domains. With that being said, it's not just families are getting serviced meals during the day or children are getting free pull-ups. It's the nutrients that we're giving when we're delivering these meals. It's the dental education, teaching them how to brush their teeth, because we do see a lot of kids come to class that maybe have some treatment that needs done. Focusing on good health habits, including getting them outside and running around because maybe they don't get that opportunity at home. They don't have playgrounds. So overall, we're just giving a huge impact to these families and children when they get to come to school. Every day counts when they come here. They're getting services, also including disability, IEP, IFSP services. So it's really, really important when the kids attend.
Susan, I'll ask you now, as the executive director of Coshocton County Head Start, what are your biggest concerns if the shutdown continues and funding isn't able to return to these programs?
I guess the biggest is that our children might not have a meal. We already have that sometimes. And so they come to school on Monday morning and want, 3 bowls of cereal. So I'm really concerned about that with the SNAP benefits. And then also, some of our children are foster care. Some are being raised by grandparents. Just having a safe place to come and be themselves during the day. And then also my staff. I have 60 staff, which is a large amount for our rural area. And Some of them are single mothers, and they're not going to have a paycheck. So I think those are my biggest fears.
And Julie, as the executive director of Ohio Head Start Association, given the uncertainty of this situation, how are you feeling right now? And what message do you have for people who might be tuning into the show right now and families who are impacted?
Yeah, to listen to Susan and Amber and hear the struggles that they're having and how hard they're working to keep their doors open and to keep serving families really kind of breaks my heart. They have other really important work to be doing. And we need the federal investment, and it truly is an investment. We know that there's a great return on that investment and savings later in life. So breaking the continuity of care by closing centers is really disruptive and destabilizing. And we know that the vast majority of Head Start parents are working. So these are parents who may not be able to go to work because they're losing the reliable, safe, nurturing environment they count on for their child to be in while they go to work. So, and it's the ripple effect of the vendors that Susan and her program, all of the programs use in their local communities, and the food that they buy. And so this is very much a ripple effect, and I'm very concerned if the shutdown goes on that this will just be a domino in one community after another.
Susan, if you do have to shut your doors in a couple of weeks here, what happens then after that? How quickly could you get back up and running when the shutdown ends, whenever that happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. We really don't know. We're hoping within a few weeks, but right now my grant is sitting at our regional office, and it has to get approved through Washington. It's a new grant period. We're in our first year of our new 5-year grant cycle. So I'm kind of just telling my parents and my staff that, it could be weeks. I just don't know at this point.
And that grant application, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What's happening there, when that was submitted, and what you were hoping to happen with that?
Yes, every year, I've been here 28 years, and every year we have to, we write a grant, and then we send it in for approval. We have to explain what we're doing with the money, how we're helping the community, the children. We also give some scores that our children are doing on their development, so they know that we're doing good things with the grant. And then I turned mine in August. That's when August 1st it has to be in, and then it goes back and forth a couple times between me and the regional office, and then the last thing that needed changed was just a small snippet. It wasn't even very big. And so I finished that and sent it back. And it was before the October or the September date, but I have not heard anything from anyone because we don't have contact with them. So I know it's sitting somewhere, but since I just sent it back like a few days before the deadline, I don't think I don't think it's been sent to Washington yet to get approved.
Now, Julie, back in April, President Donald Trump's internal budget draft included a proposal to eliminate funding for Head Start. So even if the shutdown ended today, would you be concerned about the financial future for Ohio's Head Start programs?
I am. And when Susan talks about the regional office, on April 1st, the regional office that oversaw Ohio and 5 other states and Chicago was shuttered. And the federal staff that oversees and supports Head Start programs was cut about in half. So, the fact that the federal staff now have much larger workloads when they're working with somebody like Susan, she's working with somebody who doesn't know her program because the person who in Chicago who did was furloughed in a RIFT or whatever in April. And yes, and the budget that was leaked was very concerning. we rallied our community, the communities rallied around us, and it worked. And we were back in the budget, but it's been a very uncertain year. So when Susan says, I'm not sure what's going to happen, it's because things have just happened that we never expected before this year.
Now, Amber, it's my understanding that learning materials are being sent out to kids. So can you tell us about that, what those materials include and how families can access them?
Yeah, so we had planned ahead of time that if we were to close our doors, we still want to provide services to our families in whatever means that we can. So we did start looking at things that we can send home with our families. So we have some backpacks that we'll be sending that have activities in them. We try to focus on parents as being the child's primary teacher. So sending home things that are going to not only educate the child, but also educate the parent on why this is developmentally appropriate. So teaching the whole family. On top of that, we have had our community come together and help us with some donations. Not a lot, but enough that is non-perishable food. So if the children are off temporarily, we can give them something to eat at home. That is our worry. Over 65% of our families receive SNAP benefits. So this is scary. We're sending our families home, and we as staff, that we care about them. We are a school family. We don't want them to go without. So we want to do whatever we can to provide services in the meantime. But again, if we're unemployed, we wouldn't be able to be here to provide services. So we're trying to send whatever we can back into the home while we're off.
And Julie, as we've heard about here today, and as we're seeing these Head Start programs are doing everything they can to keep their doors open as long as possible. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like, what different programs are doing to try and make that happen?
So some of the programs are part of a larger organization that does have the funds to be able to keep the program running. We have some programs that have not had to put out any notification. They don't have any impending closure, but that's not something that is sustainable. And eventually they will have to make those difficult decisions about when and how they might need to close their classrooms.
Let's talk about Coshocton County again specifically, Susan. Are the services that are happening in Coshocton County, are they specific to that particular area? Any individual specific needs there that might not be seen in other, maybe more urban places?
Well, it's a very rural community, and we still have parents, drug abuse. We have some homeless children. So sort of like an urban, but at a smaller scale. But because we're a small town, we feel the big effect of it.
Yeah, often in those rural communities, there aren't a lot of other childcare options for families.
Yeah.
And that's definitely the case in Highland and Scioto County that have had to close their classrooms. And one of the hallmarks of Head Start with the federal to local funding is it is local leaders making decisions about what's best for the unique needs of their community. And it keeps them very nimble and able to change as those needs change.
Amber, I'll ask you now. Head Start is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year. So you've shared with us the personal and connection that you have with Head Start programs. Can you just talk broadly about the way it's changed the lives, maybe for you and for children that you work with?
Oh, where do I start? Head Start is a saving grace for a lot of our families, including myself. It has been a safety net for myself when I had my children enrolled. I had so much with mental health services, and we talk about staff wellness. It's helped me be resilient, and I know that's how I know it's helping our families right now, because I see it. I see the full cycle. It's amazing that we are here for families when they need someone, they need support, they need our Head Start services. It's hard to imagine if we weren't available and not here, because we know what they go without. And that, like Julie said, is a ripple effect, because it does affect the parent, it affects the child, it affects the community. So myself, I've seen how much our parent support means a lot to our families. The stability won't be there. And that's what I think we're afraid of as a program, because we know what we mean to our families. And that makes it sad right now that we aren't able to continue care without federal funding.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us and the experiences of those you've worked with. That was Amber Manbeck, Coshocton County Head Start Family Community Engagement Manager. Amber, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And we've also had with us Susan Craddock, Coshocton County Head Start Executive Director. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
And Ohio Head Start Association Executive Director Julie Stone. Julie, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate you covering the story.
We'll take another quick break, and when we're back, we are all getting in the hot seat, metaphorically speaking, of course, as comedian and author Josh Womack takes us inside an historic sauna and steakhouse with his new book, Sweaty Stories from the Cleveland Schwitz. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. This is The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. For almost 100 years now, the Cleveland Schwitz has been a place for community connection, a good sweat, and a good meal. Known for its saunas and steak dinners, today this historic bathhouse blends old world tradition and modern amenities, catering to both men and women on different days. You'll find the Schwitz Social Club at the end of Luke Avenue on East 116th Street, 1 block up from Kinsman Road in Cleveland. It's a bit of an enigma to those who have not been, myself included, leaving many of us wondering, is anybody welcome there? Do I need a special invitation to attend? And what's really so hot about what happens inside those closed doors? Well, joining us now to fill us in is comedian and author Josh Womack. He's taking us all inside the Schwitz with his latest book, available today, Sweaty Stories from the Cleveland Schwitz. Josh, thanks for being here.
Stephanie, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, if you would like to join the conversation, maybe you have a Schwitz story to share or a question about this iconic building here in Northeast Ohio, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Josh, I want to ask you first. The Schwitz was written about before, in 2011, and it got that author, Doug Tratner, banned from the Schwitz. So I want to know, how did the Schwitz regulars feel about this book coming out? Are they okay with you dishing all of these sweaty secrets?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think time kind of heals wounds a little bit. When that story originally was published in 2011 by Doug in Scene Magazine, it ruffled a lot of feathers, especially kind of the ownership group of the Schwitz at that time. At that time, the Schwitz really was completely off the radar. There was no social media, no website or anything like that. I would say over the last 5 or 6 years, the Schwitz is kind of, I could say, warmed up to the 21st century a little bit in terms of social media and kind of things like that. But really, I think most people were pretty welcoming. They wanted the stories to be told. And in my research too, Doug's article was great. There were some old Plain Dealer articles, some from the 90s, some from the early 2000s. But the Schwitz was a place I always wanted to know more about. And it was a book I always wanted to read. And I was frankly very surprised that no one had written the book yet. So I figured I'll kind of give it the old college try, and this is what you have.
All right, and it is out today, Sweaty Stories from the Cleveland Schwitz. So how did you first become aware of the Schwitz? Because it's been cloaked in secrecy for quite some time.
Yeah, I had some buddies from high school who had talked about it. I was kind of a late bloomer to it. I didn't get there till I think I was about 25 or 26. But when I went, I was really impressed by the kind of the visual onslaught of kind of when you walk in. You walk up the stairs and there's a dining room full of guys just in towels eating steaks, smoking cigars, and it's like nothing you've ever seen before. And like I said, that sensory image kind of hits you right away. And then a few years later, I had gone there actually for my bachelor party in 2019. And I've just always been a big fan of saunas in general, just from a health perspective. And I think the neat thing is, there's a resurgence now kind of with the whole like hot and cold therapy, where these kind of sauna places are popping up with the cold plunges, and you see all these influencers doing it. But really, the Schwitz has been doing it for nearly a century. So it's funny how old things kind of come back around.
It's like fashion,
Very
right?
much so, yes.
You didn't invent it. We were there first.
Always fashionable to sweat, yes.
Right, right. Now, how often are you at the Schwitz? Did you have to ramp this up when you started writing this book?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it was important to me to, obviously talk to the ownership group, some regulars who had been there over the years, some of the masseurs who had been there over the years doing the massages and things like that. So I wanted to really interview a nice mix of people. I wanted to interview kind of the old school guys who have been going for 30 or 40 years. And then I also wanted to interview, too, more of the newer crowd in terms of females who are going as well. Because really, just in the past few years, they've been doing more co-ed and more ladies' days, which kind of opens up a whole new customer base to the Schwitz. Because typically in the past, the ladies' days at the Schwitzes were kind of just for like a friends and family type of thing, but really over the last 5 or 6 years, it's become more inclusive.
Well, let's take a call from Al now in Cleveland. Al has a comment he would like to share. Welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Al, go ahead.
Hi, how you doing? Josh, nice to hear your voice.
Thanks, Al. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the greatest gift of being at the Schwitz is the community and the fraternity that is present when you're sitting there in the hot steam, when you're in the cold plunge, in the dining room. And all are welcome, and it's just a real collegial, fraternal atmosphere, and I'm great that I'm able to have gone to it several times.
Thank you for sharing that experience with us, Al. We appreciate it. Now, Josh, you have interviewed longtime patrons of the Schwitz for your book, in addition to some of the newcomers that you mentioned. Can you share a story with us that surprised you?
I would say, there were a lot of them. I would say one of them was there was a young lady who came to the Schwitz. It was her first time being there since it was opened up for, ladies' days and co-ed days. So I was actually at a co-ed day last year, and a young girl had come in, probably her early 30s, and she gave kind of the front desk her name and what she was going to have to eat and all that. And when she said her last name, the owner said her dad's name. She goes, "Are you related to so-and-so?" And she goes, "Yeah, that was my dad who used to come here all the time." And she actually started to tear up when that kind of connection happened, because she remembered when she was a little girl, whenever her dad came home from the Schwitz, he was always in a better mood. He was, and it might have been a combination of the whiskey, the steak, and the steam, probably all three. But he's always in a kind of a playful and a silly mood when he came home from the Schwitz. And she knew that even at a young age, this was a guy's thing that dad did. And, girls, it wasn't a girl's thing. But now she got a chance to experience it. So when she was there, we talked a little bit, and when she went into the steam room, she went to the top step of the steam room, and she wondered, is this kind of where my dad would have steamed? And then when she was in the dining room, she's like, well, my dad have sat here, when he ate. So she was roaming the same halls that her dad had 30 years ago. And for her, it was a really special way to kind of heal some of that trauma from him passing away, to be in the same confines that, this place that he had gone to for so many years that she had heard so many stories about.
Now, I have to ask you, as someone who doesn't partake in steak myself, the spirits sound interesting, the steam sounds interesting. Do you have to have a steak? Are there other things on the menu?
No, you don't, and I never have the steak when I go.
Okay.
Yeah, I always get the seared tuna. And the steak is obviously kind of the bread and butter, what it's known for. But I think one really interesting thing about the Schwitz is it's almost like you can bring your own appetizers. It's very much a potluck kind of Oktoberfest feel. So obviously the main course is the steak or the burger, or they have, like I said, tuna and other options. But you can bring in your own sausage and your own oysters and things like that, and they cook it up for you there.
Really?
Yeah, as long as you're nice about it and you ask politely, they cook it up for you. And there's not really too many other restaurants in Cleveland where you can kind of bring your own stuff and say, hey, can you cook this up? But the Schwitz is unique in that aspect.
That is fascinating. Okay, and my producer Aya is telling me that we have a question from a caller, Todd. Todd is asking, where does the name Schwitz come from, and how did that come to be the name of this establishment?
Yeah, so Schwitz is a Yiddish term, and it means either sweating or to sweat. So, it can be used as a noun or a verb. You can say, I'm going to the Schwitz, so there's the exception. There it is as a noun, or it can be a humid day, and you can say, I'm schwitzing like crazy, which means, I'm sweating. So yeah, Schwitz comes from kind of that Yiddish background. So that's kind of where it derives from.
And I want you to turn that book ever so slightly because I want people to be able to see the cover of it. So if you're watching us on the Ohio channel, Josh has a copy of his book. There we go. It's Sweaty Stories from the Cleveland Schvitz. If that's possible, I want to make sure that people can see the cover of it if you're watching us on YouTube or the Ohio channel. So even more this way. Angle it away from me.
Oh, this
The
way?
other way.
Oh, this
Completely
way?
the other way.
Oh, gotcha.
There you go.
There we go.
Perfect. So I
know if
want to
it'll
ask
stay.
you now, you're talking about the Schvitz being a Yiddish term, and it's been associated with the Jewish culture. So who's welcome at the Schvitz? How do you get to go in? Who can go there?
Yeah, isn't that the great question? Is how do you like get into this place, or how do you find out about this place? I always say, the Schvitz is one of those if you know type of places, and it operated like that for a very long time. I would say, especially 80s, 90s, early 2000s, it was one of those things where maybe you had to drop a certain name to get in, and from the research I've done, some of that's folklore. You never know with time; the stories kind of get faded a little bit, but I would say. Today, the Schvitz does a great job of being more inclusive, than ever. And it's really interesting, the dynamic between the Schvitz and the Mount Pleasant area. Because the Mount Pleasant area, when the Schvitz started in 1927, obviously looked a lot different. It was mostly Eastern European immigrants who were in the area. Obviously, the area has changed a little bit. But I would say the Schvitz, really never went out of its way to educate the community on what it was all about. But at the same token, the community never really tried to understand kind of what the Schvitz was and kind of the, I guess you could say the hereditary aspect of it. So it's kind of, it takes two to tango kind of deal. And it's funny, if you go just 3 hours up the road, there's a Detroit Schvitz. And the Detroit Schvitz almost has a similar trajectory as kind of the Cleveland Schvitz. The area has changed over the years, and they've been trying to do a better job of, just, I guess you could say, educating the community about what it's all about.
Now, you've talked about the Schvitz now having women-only hours and also co-ed events. So what does that look like? Are people still walking around in towels? How does that work?
Yeah. So like I said, I went to a co-ed day last year, and they kind of block off each locker side. So there's privacy, obviously. I would say it's almost like just going to like a pool party or going to like Edgewater. It's like your favorite bar mixed with a pool party. So people are walking around in, kind of their bathing suits and things like that. Men and women can steam together, obviously, in the steam room if it's a co-ed day, and then everyone eats upstairs together. There is a patio, too, that they just built in the last couple of years. So I would say, there are some Schvitz purists who say, I'm only going to go, if it's a guy's day. Or there was a lady that I interviewed for the book, and she kind of had a similar thing. She said, I love my husband, but I would never take him here, because she just liked the feel of it just being like a girl's thing just for that day. So it's really whatever your preference is.
Can you tell us, how do the longtime male patrons feel about it opening up to females at the Schvitz?
I would say most are open-minded. There's a couple old school who, are a little stubborn about it. But I think for those guys that I interviewed, they just said, they just won't go on those days if it's like a co-ed day. They'll just stick to, the male days. The Schvitz is interesting because whatever kind of time period you grew up in, that's when you think the Schvitz period was at its best. So the Schvitz has had like 5 ownership groups over the last 100 years. So now, today, a gentleman by the name of Billy Buchholz is the owner. He's been running it since 2017. Before him, it was 2 brothers, Mark and Greg Balo. Before them, it was a guy named Gay Gold who ran it. And it's funny, when I talk to different people, they'll say, oh, the Gay Gold era was the best, or the Mark and Greg Balo era was the best. And then people who've just come to it say, oh, I love how it is now. So it's almost like when you watch Saturday Night Live, everyone says like the older years are the best. And it's just, I think, whenever you were exposed to the Schvitz, that's the time that you kind of hold on to a little bit.
Okay, very quick questions. What does it cost to get into the Schvitz, and where can people get your book?
Yeah, so it's $150 to get in the Schvitz. That gets you your steam and your steak and all that good stuff. And then the book is available on Amazon, and you can also find it at Maxbacks in Cleveland Heights and Fireside Bookshop in Sugar and Falls. And I'll be doing a couple readings, actually. I'll be at Fireside Bookshop in Sugar and Falls this Saturday at 1 o'clock, and then I'll be at Maxbacks Tuesday, November 11th at 6 o'clock. So this book, I hope people enjoy it. And if you've never checked out the Schvitz before, I would say give it a try. You might love it, you might hate it, but you will never forget it.
All right, Sweaty Stories from the Cleveland Schvitz, author Josh Womack. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie.
That wraps up our show for today. To get the last word on today's topics, you can email soi@ideastream.org. Now, yesterday, in our first installment of our new series, Law of the Land, we talked about access to social media and balancing that access with children's social media and First Amendment rights. Jacqueline wrote, I think when we have a supermajority conservative element in our state that has views on particular ideological stances that they try to push on parents, that is completely wrong. We have parental rights and the rights to raise our children as we see fit, and until our children are in danger, being neglected, being abused, those should not be challenged. She writes, last I checked, we had a free country where with freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and many more freedoms, those should be honored under our Constitution. Jacqueline, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, we'll run down today's election results. Thanks for being with us and keeping the conversation going. I'm Stephanie Haney. This has been The Sound of Ideas.